So, hello. I'm a literary scholar, literary critic. My main field is a comparative research on the multilingual literature of Lithuania and Vilnius in particular. So I'm doing research not only on Yiddish literature, but also on Polish, Lithuanian, Belarusian, Russian, German. I'm trying to cover all this panorama and all these this nexus and interconnections that Krzysztof just spoke about. I've written a book on a multilingual modernism in Vilnius before the First World War, the beginning of the 20th century. Another book is on the Lithuanian context of Czesław Miłosz, and I'm proud that this Polish version was published by Krzysztof Czyżewski, who is my publisher. Another field is, of course, Yiddish literature, and I'm also a translator and a writer. One of the translations that I'm most proud of is Avrom Sutzkever's Green Aquarium, the Green Aquarium in Lithuanian language, published in 2013, and a book that became a true bestseller and got a very, very wide reception in Lithuania. And now I've just finished a translation of Itzhak Rudashevsky's diary in Lithuanian language. Now I will start my presentation. We'll discuss Sutzkever's poems written in the Vilna ghetto during the Holocaust times. I've also translated a collection of them. I'm also looking forward to publish a book. And I would like to discuss, first I would like to discuss their uniqueness, their poetical language. I think they are unique in the entire context of Holocaust literature and poetry. Also during the second part of my presentation, I will present the Lithuanian reception and Lithuanian translations of Avrom Sutzkever's work. But first, I would like to start from this photo. This is a cover, a front title of a newly discovered Sutzkever's manuscript collection 10 Lieder, 10 poems. That was found among the other documents in that hidden box, hidden treasury in the St. George in Vilnius, the book palace. Now this collection is on exhibition at the Lund Institute in New York, and I had the chance to look at it and to make copies at the Lithuanian National Library before it shipped to New York. And I was struck when I took this small book by the title itself, by the form of a manuscript. 10 Lieder, it is already a code. It is already a key to his poetical language. Look what happened to this lamed in the Lieder. It's a stroke, it's a cutting edge. The first letter became a dash or an opening split in that page. Mm-hmm. I think it's also a kind of it shows his aesthetical approach. Very important to his poetics. And of course, the bottom, the date is speaks for itself. Vilna Ghetto, Mai 1943. Vilnius Ghetto, May 1943. Manuscript collection that was hidden in the ghetto and discovered just months ago. Yeah. Now, as we all know, Theodor Adorno, in his 1951, in his essays written in 1951, Cultural Criticism and Society, has declared a radical statement: after Auschwitz, to write a poem is barbaric. Adorno formulated this statement as a criticism against the reification, Verdinglichung, of a post-war European culture, and as a reflection on the emptiness of the traditional cultural forms in the new situation after Auschwitz, including the emptiness of lyric, the emptiness of traditional lyric. Nevertheless, Adorno's statement sounds as a general prohibition to depict, to narrate artistically, to metaphorize the tragedy of the Holocaust, especially if the artistic representations lack the adequate critical consciousness. Well, in my opinion, Sutzkever's poetry is one of those rare examples that prove the possibility of some artistic phenomena, of some poetical texts, overcome this dichotomy between art and critical consciousness after Auschwitz. Well, Adorno himself suggested that there is one extraordinary example above this dichotomy, and it is the work of Paul Salaam. Of course, both Salaam and Sutzkever are unique authors in the Holocaust literature because they found this new poetic language while being in the heart of darkness, while writing during the Holocaust, not after Auschwitz. Salaam intensively wrote poetry while in Chernovitz ghetto and in labor camp, and his impressive Death Fugue, Todesfuge, was written down immediately after liberation in 1944. Sutzkever, 7 years older than Salaam, created major poetical works such as long poems The Grave Child, Doskeverkin, and Kol Nidre, while in Vilnius ghetto itself. Of course, Sutzkever's poetical language developed in quite a different way in comparison with Salaam, and in a way that was hardly envisioned by Adorno. The main difference, I think, was language itself. Writing in German for Salaam meant a profound existential problem, a conflict in his personal identity, and writing in Yiddish for Sutzkever was the most natural and authentic expression and meant complete loyalty to the victims. Then, of course, there are differences of poetical worldview. According to Adorno, Salaam's poems imitate a language beneath the helpless language of human beings, and his fragmented phrases suggest a total catastrophe of language, the witness of a total catastrophe of language. On the contrary, Sutzkever speaks about the extremely strenuous search for a truthful word, for a truthful language, for a truthful, precise and witnessing word, as if one would make a step in a minefield, as we remember from the opening initial images of the green aquarium. As Adorno would require, Sutzkever is totally aware of the dangers of linguistic simulations and still believes in the transformative power of language. Moreover, as we know from the green aquarium, the choice of the right word for Sutzkever also means the rescue of life. Not only witnessing the loss and catastrophe, it means extracting the speech from the underworld of the dead. By choosing the right word, one chooses life. Indeed, an exclusive part of Sutzkever's creative work are poems written in Horta and Vilnius, while being at the center of the catastrophe and going through the loss of people dear to him, several times approaching the verge of an abyss himself. And the poet still doesn't stop writing intensely. Sutzkever's verses and even long poems were created in various hideouts in Vilnius, while he was imprisoned in the ghetto, while he was sitting in that hideout under the tin roof in his mother's house for several weeks, while he was hiding himself in a chimney, in the situations that are hard to imagine, and of course also at the time spent with Jewish partisans and after the return to the ruins of the Lithuanian Jerusalem in 1944-45. However, except for diaries, letters, chronicles, and songs, the major literary works of the Holocaust were written post factum, either after liberation or after a considerable span of time in an utterly different space. And this direct witnessing of experience in such a complicated poetical language is really a unique phenomenon. Sutzkever's poems written in the ghetto amaze us in several aspects, I think. Their precise poetical form, their original mind-piercing metaphors with cutting edge of the language, and concentrated load of expression. Moreover, they are very closely related to the specific space of Vilnius ghetto, to the specific local spaces where they were written. In part, they work as a reminder of the experience of a very particular experience connected to specific places. And in my opinion, they also establish these symbolic places themselves. I would like to demonstrate what I mean by showing these photos. This is the building of the ghetto library and the building of a first Judenrat in Vilnius. A building which was connected with many cultural activities and activities of a ghetto resistance. As you can see in these photos from 1979, I have on purpose picked those photos from the old times. You can see that these buildings were totally neglected in the Soviet times. No signs of their history, nothing. They were a ruin, just a ruin. And unfortunately, they are still in such ruined condition up till now. No memory, no texts connected with those buildings, just nothing. An empty, ruined space, a space of death. And
so this is like
no, it's 1979. You know, but today is better already, but still they're empty. I'll show more photos later. However, in his verse, "I lie in a coffin," ich lieg in a norm, which was created in 1941, in this same courtyard, when Sutzkever was hiding from the Hapunes, the Jew catchers, in a coffin, in the Judenrat yard street, he describes this place as a place of transformation, as a place of resurrection. And this poem, "I lie in a coffin, ich lieg in a norm," is so strong aesthetically that without any signs of memory, it becomes a lieu de mémoire. It becomes a place of memory just because of this text. Another such place, which is totally neglected and ruined up till now, is a former Ghetto Hospital. We just spoke about this story when Justin Kennedy spoke about the memoirs, about the killing of Sutzkever's infant child in this hospital. The photos are taken by me in 2015. There is a complex of buildings, this former hospital, and you can see what is inside. There are apartments, people live there, but there are no signs up to now. The gates are from the times of the war to this building. The inside also is remained from those times of the Ghetto Hospital. But without his text, Zum Kind, without the sheer power of poetry, that space would speak nothing up till now. Because of his poetry, these spaces, these spaces are filled with memory. Another one, another space and another place of memory is the Rom printing house. The famous Rom printing house in Vilnius, that was also mentioned before in our presentations. And Avrom Sutzkever's poem Die Bleine Platten von Roms Druckerei, the lead place of the Rom printers, tells about the partisans' preparation for military resistance while awaiting the destruction of the ghetto. Melting lead printing mattresses into bullets in this building, in the old Rom printing house. And also they established this place as a memorial site. The poem speaks for itself and creates an empathy to this space, which in another instance would be just a dead fact, dead information in people's imagination, in people's mentality. Now, Professor David Roskis, one of the main researchers of Avrom Sutzkever, says that the poet's relation to the Holocaust was not fixed all the time. It varied throughout his life in the ghetto and underwent some deep inner changes. As Roskis puts it, three profound shifts in Sutzkever's response to catastrophe took place. From romantic exuberance to pained confession, from private grief to public exhortation, and from epic statement back to a private metaphysical communion with the dead. Thus, the search for poetic expression was a complicated quest, a complicated path. And in fact, some famous verses written by Sutzkever during the Holocaust seem to belong to opposite poles. There are lyrical songs and ballads continuing neo-romantic aestheticism that Sutzkever was close to before the war. For example, his famous song Unter deine weiße Stern that we heard yesterday. And there are rhetorical texts the rhetorical texts of resistance, rhetorical texts of Jewish struggle, texts that forge Jewish national memory and manifest the pathos of armed and cultural resistance, employing biblical archetypes to highlight heroic gestures. For example, this poem that I just mentioned, Die Bleine Platten von Roms Druckerei, or the poem Kol Nidre. However, there is also a certain group of poems that Roskis calls the text of paradox. And I think these texts stand out in the entire Sutzkever's ghetto writing. In this poem, Sutzkever mingles death and beauty, destruction and creation, agony and vitality, and speaks of the metamorphosis of the total opposites. He creates this paradox of interconnection between death and life. And these unlikely connections are expressed in unexpected, even shocking metaphors. Really sharp, shocking metaphors, and I think this might be understood as the main similarity with Salaam's poetical surrealism. One example of such poetry of paradox is of course Sutzkever's poem to a child, Zum Kind, dedicated to his newborn who was poisoned right after birth in the Ghetto Hospital. The poem starts with a confession. I'm showing the Yiddish version. I'm probably not going now for the lack of time to read it in Yiddish. Out of hunger or out of great love, but your mother can be a witness to it, I wanted to swallow you, my child. When I felt your small body cool in my hands, as if I was cradling a warm glass of tea and felt it turning cold. Horror about his dying baby and anxiety to save his life interweaves with another ultimate experience, the sense of hunger in the ghetto, that pushes the human psyche, as is admitted by the subject, to the verge of the inhuman, to this thought about a swallowing child. But we also conceive that the desire to swallow a dying newborn embodies another kind of logic, the logic of a ritual, of a mystical action, a pursuit to prolong and strengthen life by overcoming this total death. A mythical nucleus emerges in the center of Sutzkever's shocking paradox. The ritual is extreme because the very situation of death is extreme. But even in the face of death, the poet speaks about the bond, about the crystallic beauty of his dying child, and about the imperative to continue the cycle of life. And you will sink like a splinter of dusk into the quiet depths of snow and bear greetings from me to the small shoots of grass beneath the coat. Of course, Sutzkever's persistent writing in extreme Holocaust circumstances raises the question of the identification of a poet himself. Did he perceive himself as a recorder of specific experience, a spiritual leader of the community, a moral accuser, or a modern artist who tried to disassociate himself from the sphere of immediate reality to acquire an aesthetic distance at all cost? It seems to me that none of the above identifications suit Sutzkever, or paradoxically, they all suit him because he comes from an essentially different position. And equally different is the position of the lyric subject in his verse. I think this position becomes most visible in one of the earliest examples of Sutzkever's paradox poetry. I lie in a coffin, ich lieg in an Orm. Composed, as I told just before, while indeed lying in a coffin that served him as a hideout. The beginning of the verse is as follows. I lie in a coffin, as if in a wooden suit I lie. Let this be a ship over storming waves. Let this be a cradle. The coffin, which is supposed to be a place of separation of the soul from mundane reality, a retreat from the world of human beings, is transformed into a new form of life, a new robe for the body, a ship for a never-ending journey, and ultimately a new vessel, a cradle of life. On the verge of the death, the subject is met not by absolute silence and calm, but hears and feels a response. He hears the voice of a being from another dimension, senses her glimpse, and even feels the proximity of her presence, her breath. And here, where bodies have split themselves from time, I call after you, sister, and you hear my call in the distance. What happens in a coffin? A shiver, an unexpected body? You come. I discern your black pupil, your breath, your light. Actually, I should read that in Yiddish. Of course, the translation that they have here is not me. Okay, I'll finish this part, the short summary, I'd like to sum up my thoughts on Sutzkever's poetical style. Going back to the statement about poetry after Auschwitz by Theodor Adorno. Well, Adorno later in his negative dialectics asked even more radical question than before. He asked whether after Auschwitz you can go on living at all. Sutzkever's poetry, which was able not only commemorate, not only to condemn and to prophesize, but also wrestled with language for the ability to live, to love, to crave, has indeed found a unique way to mediate, to conjoin the dead and the living, rather than separate them eternally. A poetic word was perceived by Sutzkever as a life-prolonging, rescuing, and enduring medium. It is a powerful belief in the eros of language, a renewing eros of language. And I think that's why his work acted and still acts as an intermediary between this world of death and the contemporary life. And that is the greatest paradox of his poetic testimony of the Holocaust. And now some examples about this impact of Sutzkever's poetry for the contemporary Lithuanian readers and cultural public. I'll try to keep it very, very short. This may look for you just a scrap of old newspaper, but it's very dear to me, because it is a first publication of Sutzkever's translation into Lithuanian languages that I first read when I was 16. I was a schoolboy, and I've got this cultural weekly, Šiaurės Atėnai, Lithuanian weekly, and read poems and a story that totally amazed me. The poetical cycle Penemer in Zumpen, The Faces in Swamps, was written by Sutzkever when he was hiding under this tin roof in his mother's house in the Šnipišo district in Vilna. And they were hidden. They were hidden by his wife and discovered only in 1990 in Vilnius. Most part of his poems were lost and were forgotten by Sutzkever, by the poet himself. And they were brought to him in 1993 and published in Lithuanian translation. So it was the first message at all about Sutzkever's poetry in Lithuania, and they were translated by another very important person, poet Alfonsas Bukontas, who was himself a child rescued during the Holocaust. His true name is Michnitsky. He was saved by the Lithuanian family in a village and became a Lithuanian poet. And he also started publicly acknowledging his Jewish identity after the fall of the Soviet regime. So it was a really very special publication. Now, afterwards, we have several books in Lithuanian, several translations of Avrom Sutzkever. His memoir from Vilnius Ghetto, published in 2011, from Vilna Ghetto, unfortunately translated from Russian language, not from the Yiddish original, and the translation is not very good in fact. But still, this book exists in Lithuanian already. Then my translation of Green Air Aquarium, published in 2013, and a collection of Sutzkever's ghetto poems in the Lithuanian poetical almanac Poezijos Pavasaris, published in 2013. As you see, the year is the 100th anniversary of Avrom Sutzkever. And I think in Lithuania that was truly a breakthrough for the reception of his poetry. Many activities followed these publications. First of all, what I would like to show you was a voluntary action by volunteers, by students, to clean the space of the old ghetto library, a totally neglected space. We did this action, which was also a kind of memorial service to that place in 2013. The place was inhabited by the homeless people. They had simply to collect their garbage and syringes of drug addicts from that building. And in this building, we organized first readings of Avrom Sutzkever after the ghetto times, after war times, and the short establishment of the Jewish Museum there. They took place in September, not 2017, September 2013. And you have 3 Holocaust survivors reading Sutzkever's poetry in that same building of a ghetto library. Fira Bramson, Alpernene, Fania Bransovsky, who was a partisan of the Vilnius ghetto, and Irena Veisaitė. Another readings of Sutzkever's poetry took place in February, 11th of February this year, at the Book Palace, at the St. George Church, where the Judaica collection, the hidden Yiddish manuscripts from the Yivo collections, were hidden for the Soviet times and are, as you know, are still being discovered until the latest months. It was a large event with readings of poetry in different languages and artistic installations. As you can see, rows of white books with white sheets of paper, a clear sheets of paper in that space, as if reminding of this book as a remaining clear, pure form, despite of all the destruction. A graffiti. Sutzkever's graffiti in the Rudninkai Street, Rudnitsker Gas, a place near the main ghetto entrance, near the main ghetto gate. A quotation from the Green Aquarium, Geh überwärter wie über ein Minenfeld. Go over words as if over a minefield. I'm not sure about the English translation, but it's about stepping over words as in a minefield. So this graffiti appeared in May 2016. You may still see it now, and it's a powerful reminder. Not plagues, not some official ceremonies to a passerby about a poet who wrote there. And finally, what I mentioned during our readings yesterday, a musical oratory, a Vogenschief, a cartload full of shoes, by composer Jonas Jurkūnas, performed at Vilnius St. Catherine's Church this September, a large performance with a choir and with a chamber, St. Christopher's Chamber Orchestra in Vilnius. Of course, I've got no time left to launch the music, at least a fragment of it. I'll just say to you that the most powerful moment in that oratory for me was a mingling of this poem, of this rhythm of wheels in this poem, with a lyrical tune of Vilna, Vilna, unser Heimstatt. That was the most powerful point in this oratory. Thank you very much for that.